Hey everybody, Robert with RC Archery, and you're watching Tuesday's Tip of the Week number 84. In this week's video series, we're going to be talking about creating a steadier sight picture with our release hand side of our body. So in today's video, we're going to be going over our anchor points, what we're looking at for some signs that we may or may not have a good anchor point. We're going to be looking at how we're holding the release and the pressure on the release so we don't create torque or drive our sight picture in a way that's not into the middle of the target. And then we're also going to be looking at our follow through and how that kind of plays a part in what we're doing with our setup, and using that as a way to diagnose and help us with correcting any form flaws or any shot execution flaws as well. In this week's members only video, we're going to be talking about setting up the tension on a thumb trigger and making sure that we aren't creating torque in the release, but we're also not having a weak shot with the way that we're actually setting up the thumb button. And then our YouTube shorts that we have coming out on Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to deep dive into anchor points, where on our face we're anchoring and what part of our hand we're using as that anchor point. And then we're also going to talk about our loop length and what we're looking at as far as controlling leverage and getting our rear shoulder into the correct position. Let's get started. All right, and the first part that we're going to talk about today is our anchor points. Anchor points and how we're setting this up is important for a couple reasons. One, it does take out some of the buzziness and some of the movement that we can see in our sight picture by connecting our hand to our face. So we do want to use that as a reference point. But then the other side of this is how we're setting up this anchor point and how it correlates with our peep height will allow us to also be steadier on target and execute our shot a lot easier. There are times that you may notice that you have your hand anchored higher or lower on the face, and you can actually find a steadier sight picture. There's a couple ways that we can look at this and we can attack this situation so you can handle this and see what works best for you. One is looking at our peep sight. When we are drawing the bow back, if we can draw it back with our eyes closed, find our comfortable anchor position with our hand and keep our head in an upright position, this will be most repeatable from one shot to the next. At that point, we just need to adjust the peep sight up and down to match. The other thing that we can do with this is we can actually test this with our shooting on target. And we can have our peep sight a little bit higher or a little lower, and that correlates to our hand being anchored a little higher or lower on the face as well. And then we can see where we're holding steadiest and where it's easiest for us to execute our shot. I have found for me that I like to have a higher anchor point on my face than what some archers do. I usually just use my index finger. I want to make sure that I have that really well connected with the bottom part of my jaw, and that's how I'm anchoring. I've seen some archers that anchor with their middle finger on the bottom part of their jaw, some of them below it even, so it just depends on where you need to be. This distance from our shoulder to our elbow and our elbow in through our hand is different for everybody, so you have to find what works best for you. Another thing that I will say when it comes to anchor points is, if possible, I like to recommend having a straight line that runs through the wrist so that we don't have our hand bent like this or we have it bent in and out. And the reason I recommend that is those can put some adverse torque into our release and we can start pulling our shot in different directions. So as you can imagine, if your hand is bent like this, if you go to pull through the release, you're pulling upwards on it, you can pull the bow down on target. Same thing if it's rocking in and out. Some people do need to have that bend in their wrist to get their rear shoulder in an ideal spot and to get their hold to match up, but everybody's a little different. I would say majority of the archers can have that straight line through their wrist though. All right, the next thing that we want to look at is how we're actually putting our hand on the release. For most of you, you are using a handheld style release, whether it's a thumb button or a hinge. For you, how you're gripping that release and the way that you're putting your hand in it can actually help us or hurt us in our steadiness on our sight picture. When it comes to gripping a release, we want to have what's called a J hook into that release. We want to have it wrapped around. We want it to be in the mid part of our fingers, in that mid knuckle area. We don't want it to be buried too deep because it will cause problems. We don't want it too far out on our fingertips for the same reasons. Having our hand in that J hook position generally will make the back of our hand a flatter angle and a flatter position. That helps a lot with consistency from one shot to the next, takes a lot of the muscle out of our shot that can vary. And then it also allows us to have a relaxed but well-held grip on our release, so that when we start to execute our shot and pull through, and we're working through a hinge or even working through a thumb button release, there's a little bit of flex and give in that hand, a little bit of stretch and elongation. It allows that hinge to rotate and allows the thumb to come in contact with that button and build tension on it organically and make it a little bit easier to trip our shot consistently. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about today is our follow through. Now, you have heard me talk about this before when it comes to our bow arm. And we even had a YouTube Shorts that was on this channel where I was talking about a method that Griv uses if you are dropping out of the target or having some issues with holding the hand up a little bit more and allowing your hand to reach an inch or a little closer to the target at release. If you haven't watched that, check out the YouTube Shorts on here. You'll be able to see it. It wasn't too far back. But today we're going to go over the release hand side and what we're getting from that and what we're looking for in some areas of concern that can pop up with what we're seeing. On our release side, when it comes to that follow through, we're looking for the hand to come back in a straight motion away from our face and generally in somewhere over the top of our shoulder, somewhere in that area. Some archers have a more pronounced follow through, some do not. Jesse Broadwater is one that comes to mind. His hand will come out away from the face and then he relaxes through the elbow and the hand comes pretty far back. Myself, I don't do that. I really like when my hand comes out and then I can just touch the top of my shoulder. If I can do that, that means that I had really good tension in my back and holding against the back wall all the way through my shot, and it means that I wasn't getting weak and I'm coming out correctly from my face. Some areas to look at if you're having problems is, does my hand want to pop out away from my face on my follow through? And if it does, you could be imparting some wrist bend or some varying pressures with our fingers on a release, especially if you're using a hinge release that needs that rotation. And generally it means we're getting kind of weak and timid. When we're getting weak and timid with our pull or our hold into the back wall, that hand wants to pop out and come away from the face. If you're seeing that, do some blank bail. Or even if you're in the middle of a round shooting and you notice this, you may want to focus a little bit more on exaggerating that follow through and then pulling and driving this hand over to the top of the shoulder. That usually will help you with that, just creating a not weak shot anymore and helping you get back on pace. Some other things to look for is, does the hand come up or down? Or what I see from some archers is the shot releases and their hand never moves. With our compound bows, especially hunting setups, we have a lot of let off on them. We have a high percentage of let off. We're holding very minimal weight at full draw. So I do see a lot of archers, they get to full draw, they don't have to hold back on the bow very hard like we do on our target bow setups, and they punch a release. And when they're punching that release with not the back wall pressure that's requiring them to pull through or hold against that wall, their hand is very stagnant. If you're seeing that, try to stay away from this motion. Majority of archers will struggle way more by punching their release from one day to the next. You will lose a lot of consistency. So we want to make sure that we have some kind of dynamic tension built up in our body, whether that is a continual pull or whether it's a pull into the back wall until you're steady and then working through your shot. All right guys, that is the video for today. If you are a member of this channel, go ahead, check out the members only video. If you would like to see that kind of content, there is a link down in the description of this video that will take you to the 2 packages that I offer to be a member and help support our channel. Keep an eye out for the YouTube Shorts. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel with the bell notification on so you know when these videos are coming out. And then please hit the thumbs up button on these videos. That helps the algorithm so it reaches more people and gets these videos out there. I appreciate everybody for watching today. I'll see you soon.